let's just take a moment here. This isn't about some new strategy or technique. It's really just a chance to reflect, to look at a few quiet observations from the steady rhythm of a regular week. Nothing changed this week. That's a sentence that can feel a little unsettling, right? In a world that's always pushing for progress, it can feel like you've fallen behind if you don't have some big win to report. But maybe the most important changes aren't the ones we can see day by day. Yeah, because the biggest shifts, they often aren't things that happen to us. They're changes in how we see things. So maybe the real change wasn't in what happened, but just in how you saw what was already there. So let's talk about that first shift in seeing. I mean, in this busy, over-the-top world we live in, it's so easy to feel like our kids need more of everything just to keep up. But what if that's not quite right? It's kind of a counterintuitive thought, I know, but in this whirlwind of options and activities, children don't always need more freedom. Actually, sometimes all those choices and that lack of structure, it can just feel like chaos to a little developing mind. So instead of just more freedom, what really brings them that clarity are boundaries. It's about helping them find the edges of their world so they can feel safe and secure inside of it. Think about it. Kids are always trying to make sense of their world, right? They feel safe when they have a map. And that map, well, it's drawn with clear expectations. They really need to know where things begin. When playtime starts, when it's time for a story, when they have our full, undivided attention. And just as important, they need to know where things end. A clear ending to something they love isn't a punishment. It's just a predictable part of the rhythm. And that actually provides a sense of security that, unlimited freedom often can't. And this idea of providing structure, it also applies to time itself. We have this modern instinct, don't we, to rush in and solve the problem of boredom. But what if we just reframed it? What if we decided that not every quiet moment needs to be filled? Because that quiet space, that moment of I'm bored, there's nothing to do, it isn't really a void we need to fill. It's more like a canvas. It's the fertile ground where imagination starts to take root and where some of the most meaningful, self-directed play can really begin. We see this play out all the time, right? Especially around one of the biggest friction points in any modern home, that really tricky moment when the screen turns off. And that big emotional outburst that can follow, it's so easy for us to label it. We see it as defiance or a power struggle or just a behavior problem. But if we look a little closer, we might realize that what's happening isn't always defiance. What's really going on here is a massive gear shift inside their little brains. A child is moving from this state of high dopamine passive entertainment to the much, much lower key stimulation of everyday reality. It's a really jarring transition that their system is just still learning how to manage. It's more of a crash than it is a crime. Okay, so while we're holding all of this space for our kids' internal worlds, it's just as important to acknowledge our own. Let's talk for a moment about that invisible weight, a mother's world. Because so much of the work of parenting, and motherhood in particular, it happens in these unseen spaces, in the mind and the heart. And this weight, it's not really about the things you can see, like the laundry or packing lunches. The true weight is not always visible. It's more like this quiet, constant hum of responsibility that just runs in the background of every single moment. This weight, it lives in all those little decisions that nobody else even notices. Scheduling the appointments, tracking the social dynamics at school, remembering who's allergic to what, constantly trying to emotionally forecast what's coming next to prevent a meltdown. It is a cognitive load that's just as heavy as it is invisible. And holding space for both our child's struggle and our own invisible weight, it doesn't mean we need some grand solution. It simply leads us toward a steadier response, one that comes from seeing what's really happening underneath. So when we can hold all of this together, when we really understand what's underneath these moments for our kids and for ourselves, a little bit of space opens up. And in that space, we're freed from that knee-jerk reaction. When we see a neurological struggle instead of defiance, or when we acknowledge our own exhaustion instead of just feeling irritable, we don't have to react so quickly. The goal here isn't perfection, not at all. The shift is just moving from reacting to responding. And with this kind of understanding, we can respond just a little more steadily. And that steadiness, that creates the room for connection, for a much less stressful way of just being together. This is that quiet change. It's not some dramatic overhaul. It's just
a subtle deepening of our understanding, a calmer nervous system, a more compassionate way of looking at things. And some weeks, that is more than enough.